Hi, it's so great to see you. I am going to be talking to you about my IVF journey today, and I haven't really laid this whole story out yet. I've done it in pieces here and I've done it in pieces on my blog, but I haven't really talked through the whole story. So I'm just going to tell you my experience, and I'm hoping that it helps some of you going through the same thing. And so we'll just get started. So I was diagnosed with endometriosis in 2005. Many of you know that already. And I was just told, you're going to have to manage it. I knew that I wanted to have kids. That's something that I've always known, that I wanted to be able to have children. So I made it my goal to be able to manage my endo and be able to have kids. So we started trying in 2012, and it took 5 months, but we were able to conceive our daughter naturally, which many doctors were just so surprised by. So we had a great pregnancy, great birth with her. She was born in 2013. And so I didn't think we would have any trouble getting pregnant again. Once we got pregnant once, you really just don't think you're going to have trouble the second time around. So we started trying again when she was 1, so 2014. And we tried, and we tried, and we tried, and I started doing all the things you're supposed to do. Obviously, we did basal temperature tracking, and I did ovulation test kits. I did all of that. And nothing helped. And I had just stopped nursing a few months before. So I went to see my reproductive endocrinologist. I already had an endocrinologist because of my endometriosis history and because I have a prolactinoma. So I did have an endocrinologist already. And so I went to see him when we had been trying maybe 8 months at that point, just to have my levels checked, because I also was 37 years old, I want to say, at that point, so I knew I wasn't young. So I just wanted to have everything checked, and he checked all my hormones, and nothing was too crazy or out of the realm of where it should be. My prolactin was a little high, but again, I have a prolactinoma, which is a small benign tumor that sits on my pituitary gland and causes my prolactin levels to be really high. So I knew I had that. So he did put me on some medication, thinking, let's just bring that down. Come back and see me in 6 months. So we kept going, kept trying. I kept doing more things. I decreased my coffee intake. I started reproductive acupuncture is what I'm trying to tell you. So I started taking it even more steps, still nothing. Okay, so I went back to see him. At that point, it had been maybe a year and a half. And so we did the next round of testing. We did a semen analysis on my husband. Everything was completely fine with that. And I did a saline test where they check your tubes to see if they're clear, your fallopian tubes. And so that came back completely normal also, because we assumed if the endometriosis was back, it would have blocked the tubes with the scarring. So that was normal. So at this point, it had been maybe a year and a half, almost 2 years, and everything looked fine. There was no reason we weren't getting pregnant. So they're called this secondary infertility. That means that you were able to get pregnant with a baby previously, but you're not able to get pregnant the second time or the third time, and that there's no real cause for it that they can find. So at that point, my pain had started to come back. I intuitively knew and assumed that the endometriosis was back. That's what in my gut, in my heart, it felt like to me with the pain coming back. So in 2016, in August, so it had now been 2 years and like 3 months since we had started trying, we did a second laparoscopy to see what was going on in there. Now, I've talked about this before, but a lot of people might ask, why hadn't you just gone on Clomid at that point? Or why didn't you do some other reproductive things to help? Why did you go straight to surgery? I hadn't been ready personally to do anything on the reproductive side yet with medication, because we'd never done it before. We weren't quite ready. And the other reason was every test came back normal. Even the doctor said there's no reason you aren't getting pregnant. So we just didn't have anything to tell us that would work. The final reason was I knew if the endo was back, if it was blocking anything in there, then there was no medication that was going to help that. So we just figured, let's go in and see what's going on. So I woke up from surgery, didn't see the doctor for 2 weeks for my post-op, so I had no results actually at all. I went in to see him, and the first thing he said to me was, I have no idea how you look so healthy on the outside with what I see going on inside. The endometriosis was back full force. I had what's called a frozen pelvis, stage 4 endometriosis. There was so much scar tissue that everything had adhered to itself. My uterus was attached to my abdominal wall, and my fallopian tubes were indeed blocked. So why the test showed that they weren't, I don't know. The doctor doesn't really know. But they were blocked. So he said, the good news is IVF was made for someone like you. That is your option. Have a great day. And he walked out. I knew going into surgery that that was a possibility. I had prepared myself the best I could for that knowledge, but it still was like a punch to the gut. If you've been through that, I think you know how that feels. If you are there right now, you know how that feels. I had previously had this vision of IVF, I guess, as kind of this miraculous way that you just have a baby that for some reason you can't. And so you decide to do IVF and you walk in and you do it and you walk out with a baby. I kind of, for some reason, thought that it was just this easy process. I knew it was one I didn't want to go through. And I was grappling with all of those things, I guess, mourning the idea of not being able to just see a positive pregnancy test after trying for a few months. There's a lot of emotions. So again, if you're there, I just encourage you to give yourself a lot of patience and a lot of grace and let yourself feel those things. Mourn whatever you need to and go at your own pace when you are ready. So we took, after I got that kind of knowledge, we took 6 weeks off to just completely let my body heal from the surgery. We went to Hawaii for a family vacation. I stopped trying, stopped testing, all of that. We just let it all go. And then we did our initial appointment. So if you are going through it, I would say find a few doctors, and schedule your initial kind of consultation. It can take 8 weeks sometimes to get in. And so if you're thinking about it, go ahead and schedule them now, and then you can always cancel them later, but have them on the books, because once you're ready, you're going to be ready to get some answers. And it's frustrating then to have to wait 8 more weeks. So we made our consult for November 1st. Somehow I remember that. And came out, and again, needed some time. I wasn't quite fully ready. I thought I was. Going in, I'm like, okay, to my husband, we are ready. I just want to start whatever they tell us. Let's just do it. But I came out overwhelmed. And so we needed a little more time to process. But then, like I said, once we were ready, we were ready. So we went through IVF, and we were in California at the time, and found a great doctor who I really liked. And I was going through reproductive acupuncture. I highly, highly recommend finding a reproductive acupuncturist to do with IVF hand in hand. Again, I'm not an expert. It just worked for me really well, so I do recommend that. Just having someone to help answer your questions, someone to be on your team. She was just a lifesaver for me. So we went through our first round, and we planned on doing the frozen transfer. That's what I would say 90% of doctors and cycles do now. So we went through all the normal stuff. We did the transfer the egg retrieval. And we were told we had 3 embryos. And so that was at day 1 or 2, we had 3 embryos. We were called at day 5, and none of the embryos had survived. So we had gone through an entire round of IVF. If you're wondering about cost, it is a lot of money. It was about $22,000 for us. Insurance didn't cover any of it. And we were left with nothing. We had no embryos, none that survived to day 5. So we couldn't even go through testing. We couldn't go through anything. We had nothing. And it was devastating. It was actually completely devastating. I was left in a tailspin because, again, I just assumed somehow I knew it could be maybe hard once they were implanted. I mean, I knew then, obviously, you can miscarry. A lot of things can happen. just like they would with a normal pregnancy. But there was no part of me that thought we wouldn't get any embryos or any babies out of it. I didn't even know that was a possibility. And it was, and that's what happened to us. So we had to go through the questioning of, okay, why did that happen? Why did we have no embryos survive? Where do we go now? Do we do another round? What do we do? So we went to meet with the doctor and to kind of find out why. They can talk you through the process. And she said basically my eggs were not as good of quality as they thought from the numbers and the testing. And so we just didn't have embryos of very high quality, and the few that we had just didn't make it to day 5. And you need to have them make it to day 5 in order to have them frozen, sent off for genetic testing, which is typically what they'll do. And then 6 weeks later, or however long later, you do the transfer, and it's called a frozen transfer because the embryos had been frozen and tested. So they have to make it to day 5 for that to happen, and obviously ours did not. So she said that she recommended an egg donor for us because of the quality of my eggs. She said she was willing to do another round with us with my eggs, and she gave us a 10% chance of it being successful. And she said, go home, think about it, but if we're going to do another cycle, I want to do it right away, because sometimes, in her words, sometimes that can help doing cycles back to back because my hormone levels were already at a place that might be helpful. My lining was at a place that might be helpful because I had come off this big cycle already. So it's almost like just adding on top of that to do another one. So we went home and just sat. I didn't know what to do. I really didn't. I didn't know what was right. I knew at least that day, I'm like, egg donor is not something I wanted to think about. Now, I also will say we have a daughter. We had a daughter already at that point, and so I know that decision-making was different and a little bit easier for us because we could look at her and say, we have a child. We have one already. I can't imagine going through what I went through and also knowing that I might not have a child out of it. So I feel so much for anyone going through it, and especially in that situation. So I just want to acknowledge that I know for us it was a little bit easier. And even then it felt devastating because I knew we wanted another baby. I knew I wanted another baby. I wanted to be pregnant again. I wanted a nurse. I wanted to go through all of it. One of my friends, when I was trying to decide what we were going to do, she said, well, 0 out of 10, how much do you want another child? And I said, well, 100. It's not even 10. There's no question. And she said, okay, then you need to try again. I thought maybe you would say 7. She said, but you don't have a choice. You have to try again. And so I remember standing in the shower wondering again, what can we do? What are we going to do? I wish I would be guaranteed to know that this was going to work. And I realized there was no guarantee, but that I felt like we needed to try again, because even if I couldn't be guaranteed that it worked, I would always regret not trying one more time. And so that's what we decided to do. We did decide to go through one more cycle. And so they did change my medication slightly. If you guys are interested, just let me know in the comments below, and I can do some follow-up videos and some follow-up posts about specifics on, what they did to my medication, what helped me specifically, but I won't get into it here. But they did change it slightly to help egg quality. There's a couple things that I did. I did my own research, so I changed things a little bit, but otherwise it wasn't that much different. So we went through another cycle of the stimming, of all of it, of the egg retrieval, and we ended up getting, again, I mean, not very many eggs. The first time we might have gotten, like 8 eggs, and this time maybe we got 7. We are not talking very many. So if any of you out there don't have many eggs, I did not have many that they got. I mean, people come out with 25 or 30 eggs, and I definitely did not. And so from that, we had initially maybe 4 or 5 embryos. Now, this is where things changed. My doctor was super happy with where my body was. Like, my lining was at a great place. I had personally responded to the hormones really well. It's just, again, my egg quality was the issue. She said, I want to do a fresh transfer. She said, your embryos before did not make it to day 5. I am not convinced they will make it to day 5. I would like to do a fresh transfer on day 3 because I think your body could possibly save those embryos. Instead of letting them sit in a petri dish and then sending them off for testing on day 5, let's implant them on day 3 and see what your body does with them. This is what they did before they had frozen transfers and before they did genetic testing with IVF. This is what they used to do. It's just most doctors won't do it anymore because they want to do genetic testing, because that's how they decrease miscarriages and improve the chance of a healthy, viable birth and a baby at the end. But again, this is what they used to do, and I said, yes, let's do it. My husband and I both agreed. I felt like that was the right thing for us. And again, going through a natural birth and pregnancy the first time, that's what it felt like to me, that we were just kind of going to trust the process and trust nature and see what happened, and that was our best chance. So we had 3 embryos, and she implanted all 3. Again, this doesn't happen very much anymore because they want to decrease the chance of twins and triplets and all. That's why they happened so much before, because they would implant so many embryos. For safety now, they don't do it as much, and because they don't need to, because they can do the genetic testing. But on us, we couldn't go through that process. So we all agreed. If you know all the details, we had 1 grade 1 embryo, and I feel like the others were, the lower grade. So it wasn't a very high chance they would all implant anyway. So we decided on day 3, we would do a fresh transfer. All 3 were implanted, and that is all we had. We had no other embryos. So they implanted them. I had acupuncture during the implantation with my acupuncturist. And then 2 weeks later, we had the test, and we were pregnant. So that is my story. We're actually pregnant with twins. We saw the heartbeats until 9 weeks, and then unfortunately at 10 weeks, one of the heartbeats was gone. It's called vanishing twin syndrome. I didn't expect that at all either. Apparently it's very common, and it gives the other baby a higher chance of survival. So that was another kind of mourning period we had to go through, but we were just so thankful that we have one healthy, wonderful baby boy who was born 8 weeks early, healthy as can be, no problems. He is now almost 10 months old. And that is my IVF story. It took me a long time to kind of emotionally process through it. And again, it was all gratitude. I'm so thankful. I can say now I'm thankful for going through IVF and what I learned, and mostly the compassion that I have for other people now, the understanding I have for the process. But it's a lot. So if you're in the middle of it, just know I see you. I am holding space for you. I understand 100% what you're going through. And if you have any comments, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below. If you do want to know more about my story, I'm happy to share it. You can go to my website, jessicavalantpilates.com, and I have done a blog post series that talks about the difference between fresh and frozen, how to choose a doctor, what exactly a typical IVF cycle is. So if you're at the very beginning of kind of grappling with this and wanting to get information, that's a great place to go. So go to my website and you'll learn more. There's blog posts there. But I hope that gives some of you hope, because I was on so many forums and I was so discouraged with where I was. But this is what somebody said: all you need is 1 good egg. That's all you need. You just need 1. You need 1 good embryo, 1 good egg, and you can have a baby. And I feel like that's what happened with us. And I know we got super lucky, and I am grateful every single day for it. And I hope that you keep some of that hope for yourself, because I think that's really important. And just know you're not alone. You're never alone. And here's best wishes to you.